Hi, welcome back to the Fantasy Football Profits. This is our Week 11 starts video. Before I get into the video, I want to take a moment and say thank you to all of you that have been a part of the community last year and a half. We appreciate that so much. You're viewing, watching our videos, commenting, thank you. Continue to help us build the community. You can do that a few ways. One, hit the notification button so when no videos come out, you see that. Continue to comment, like the videos, watch, and share information out there. Share the videos with your friends. And as resources come in, we're going to pour it right back into the site to continue to improve it. I'm excited for this offseason. We're going to make a number of changes to software, hardware, things like that, just to continue to improve our product. Now, on the videos, we always say you need to contextualize this information for your league. Every league is different. Scoring, setting, bench, etc. And so it's hard for us to get too specific with our information. If you have specific questions, if you put it on the bottom, we will try to answer it for you. I also want to say thank you to Ryan and Christian. Last week I was unavailable, but they did all the Q&A for us. Thank you. This week I should be available to do answers for you guys out there. Finally, people say, why do you put one out? It starts the video late Tuesday night. There's going to be changing information coming in. Well, that's true, but you know what? It's going to be true all the way to kickoff time Sunday morning. There's so much things that can change. So even if I put the video out Friday or Saturday, you need to watch all the way up to the moment of kickoff if you want the most up-to-date information. And then the other thing that we do is, in addition to the video, we did waiver-wire late Sunday night and late Tuesday night. Our starts it. Friday, we put out a daily fantasy video, and in there, we just talk about any information that might change in terms of waiver wire and start sit. So check us out on that one there. Finally, we're partnering with Thrive Fantasy. They're a daily fantasy app that's great. It's like nothing like you've experienced in daily fantasy. I would encourage you to check it out. Just click on the bottom, go to the site, and see what they're all about there. And so let's get to our first game. So let's take a look at our first game. Let's look at the Packers versus the Seahawks there. Start with quarterback Russell Wilson playing the Packers, allowing the 15th most points to quarterbacks. Now, I think a lot of people are overlooking Russell Wilson this year, and I think the reason why they're doing that is his yardage totals haven't been big. The reason why they haven't been big is this team is committed to running the ball so much. They may hurt his passing totals, but I think it's made him a better quarterback. He's been efficient, and the biggest thing is he's protecting his body physically from being beat up. Last couple of years, defenses have just teed off on Russell Wilson, but now play action is so much more effective there. And even though he's not throwing as many yards, his fantasy numbers are looking great. He's still producing out there. Last 4 games, he's averaging over 24 fantasy points per game. He's got 21 touchdown passes on the year, on pace for 37. Those are very good numbers. And an added bonus is he's finally starting to run the ball again. He's always been a very athletic quarterback, but for whatever reason, early in the year, he didn't run the ball a lot. But the last 2 games, he's got a combined 133 rushing yards. So this is a guy that you need to start. Should be a big week for him there. Let's look at Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers is having what I would call a good football season. He's got 17 touchdown passes to only 1 interception. That's very Aaron Rodgers-esque. But he hasn't had a great fantasy season. Currently, he's 12th among fantasy quarterbacks in terms of scoring goes there. Now, he's playing Seattle that gives up the fewest points to quarterbacks. Now, we pointed out last week in the video, those numbers may look like a rough matchup, but if you dive a little bit deeper, I don't think the Seattle defense is unforgiving as it may appear against the pass. And here's why. They pad those numbers against some what I would call below average quarterbacks. Early in the season against Dak Prescott, when they were struggling, they faced him. Mitch Trubisky in week 2, before Mitch began to turn things around, they faced him. Also Derek Carr and Josh Rosen. But if you look at good quarterbacks versus the versus the Seahawks, the good quarterbacks have moved the ball and scored points. So I think this is a fine matchup for Aaron Rodgers. You've got to play him. He's going to be just fine there. Let's look at the running backs. Chris Carson. So Monday, Seahawks coach Pete Carroll came out and said Chris Carson hip missed last week because of an injury. He's going to play Thursday night. And so the coach has already come out publicly and said he's going to play. You can roll with him. Now, I do have concerns with that. Everything's trending the right direction for Chris Carson, but this is not the first time that coach has come out and emphatically made a declaration like this and then later on had to backtrack a little bit. And so everything's looking good for Chris Carson to play, but watch the injury report. Don't make any assumptions there. So if he does play, that brings us, you got Chris Carson, Rashad Penny, and Mike Davis. How does that begin to sort out? Who do you start? What do you do? All three of those running backs are very good. And all 3 are capable of having good games. In fact, between the 3 of them, they've combined individually to have 100 yards rushing 5 different occasions. I think another thing that bodes well, that's not just a starter for the team, even the backup gets enough carries because they're so committed to the run that he's a guy that you could start in deeper leagues as a running back 3. So here's how this shakes out in my opinion. If Chris Carson plays starting this week as a running back 2. Now, the one concern I have, and it's hard to avoid this guy because he's been productive when he has played, so you can't ignore him, is I have concerns about re-injury there. He's been so banged up, I'll take a couple hits in the first quarter, and he sits the rest of the game, especially when Mike Davis and Rashad Penny have played so well. But once again, Chris Carson's been effective, and if he plays, you got to start him as a running back 2. And if he plays, I would still start Mike Davis as a running back 3 or flex play in larger leagues. If Chris Carson sits, just upgrade Mike Davis to running back 2, and then Rashad Penny could be running back 3 or flex play in that one. So that's how I would shake that out. Takes us to Aaron Rodgers. So this is the 5th week in a row that his carries have increased. They went from 7 to 8 to 12 to 14 to 15 there. And as his carries have increased, his production has increased. 40 yards to 41 to 86 to 75, and then last week won 145 rushing yards, a couple touchdowns there. He's clearly their lead back. He's distanced himself from Jamal Williams. I know in the preseason, a lot of people were big on Jamal Williams. We came out and said there's some analytics. We shared with you guys why you need to stay away from Williams, and Jones was going to be the guy. For those that were patient and stuck with him, congratulations. You guys have yourself a very good running back there. He's now facing Seattle, Jones is, who gives up the 12th fewest points to running backs, but I would start him as a solid running back 2 this week. He's going to be a great play moving forward there, barring injury or something like that. Start Aaron Jones as a running back 2. Now, the one thing I want to mention in the video is if there's a player that we don't mention in the video, sometimes we overlook players. That can happen from time to time. If we do, sorry. But generally speaking, if we don't mention him, it's because you can assume not to start the guy. Let's take a look at the wide receivers for the Packers, Marquez Valdes-Scantling. So Seattle allows the 14th most points to wide receiver. He's clearly become the team's number 2 guy there. Last week, he led the team in targets and catches. He's trending upwards. This rookie should be started as a wide receiver 3. Then you have Devontae Adams. Devontae Adams got 9 touchdowns in 9 games. He's on pace for over 1,400 receiving yards. Rodgers' favorite target. This guy is a stud wide receiver. Start him. That's a no-brainer. Now let's take a look at the wide receivers for Seattle. Start with Doug Baldwin. So if you look at the Packers, they are vulnerable through the air. They give up the 11th most points to wide receivers. Now, he's caught all 9 targets the last 2 weeks. And he's been dealing with a knee injury that he said early in the year would not be 100% all season long, but he's getting healthier and he's looking better and better. I think this is a good matchup for him there. He's not the wide receiver of old. A lot of reasons why. One, the injury to his knee, and he faced some good cornerbacks, but I think this week he has a big game. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets over 100 yards and finally gets in the end zone. So I would start him confidently as a wide receiver 3. Doug Baldwin, start him there. And then it brings us to Tyler Lockett. So Tyler Lockett's yards are not great, his targets are not great, his catches are not great, but 7 touchdowns in 9 games is. And so you can't ignore the guy. I would start him as a wide receiver 3. He has more value in standards but less in PPRs. As far as tight ends go, you have Nick Vannett. So Nick Vannett is a guy that's looking better. It looks like he's got more and more of a role in that offense there, but there's so many better options out there that I simply wouldn't trust him quite yet there. I would sit him. That brings us to Jimmy Graham. Plays Seattle allowing the 2nd fewest points to tight ends. It'll be him facing his old team, so maybe he'll bring a little extra motivation. He'll be excited to face that old team, and he'll bring a little bit more to the table than he has the last few weeks there. But this is a guy that has not been good this year. In fact, a lot of people going into the preseason has ranked as number 4 tight end. They were so excited about the idea of him playing for the Packers and having Aaron Rodgers as quarterback. Currently, he's ranking the 13th tight end overall. We nailed it in the preseason. We said this guy is overhyped and overvalued. Buyer beware. For a lot of you, I would suggest that you sit him this week, but I know that position of tight end is very thin. You're going to have to start him. So here's what I would say. Start the guy, but lower your expectations. As far as kickers go in this one, you have Jankowski and Crosby. I would start both of those, and I would sit both defenses in this game. That takes us to the Cowboys versus the Falcons. Dak Prescott, let's take a look at him. The Falcons are allowing the 3rd most points to quarterbacks. Their overall defense is bad right now. Now, the first 3 weeks of the year, Dak Prescott struggled. He was averaging 11.47 points per game for quarterbacks, but since then, he's averaging 21.73 points per game. He lacked a lot of weapons early in the year. That was a concern, but they traded for Amari Cooper, and that's been great because that allows the other wide receivers now to slot down to face secondary corners. And it looks like him and Amari Cooper are beginning to build rapport there. It looks great. Another thing that gives a big boost for him is Michael Gallup, the rookie wide receiver, is looking better and better. And so I think he's starting to have some weapons there. The offense is looking and showing signs of improvement. This week, I would start Dak Prescott. If you have a guy that's on a bye or injured and you need to grab a guy from the waiver wire, he's a guy that you could pick up and play with a lot of confidence. I like Dak Prescott in this matchup. Let's look at Matt Ryan. So playing Dallas allowing the 17th fewest points to quarterbacks. That Dallas defense has been pretty good, but Matt Ryan has been great this year. So after week 1 and 2, that Falcons defense lost a lot of key starters. And that defense has taken a major step back. Currently, right now, they're 29th in the NFL, allowing 28.8 points per game. And because of it, he's had to throw the ball a lot. Since week 3 and beyond, he's had 19 touchdown passes, only 1 interception. He's averaged since then 356 passing yards per game after week 2. This guy's been phenomenal. Then you add on the development of tight end Hooper, rookie wide receiver Ridley. This is a guy that you need to start. I like Matt Ryan. Let's look at the running backs, Ezekiel Elliott. So Atlanta's given up the 4th most points to running backs, and I think Elliott's been forgotten by them. They get caught up in names like Alvin Kamara, Todd Gurley like that, and they forget about Ezekiel Elliott. This guy is very, very good, and he's having a great season. Start him as a running back 1. Currently, he's 8th amongst running backs in fantasy scoring. He's on pace for 2,000 total yards, and he's got 62 catches. This guy looks great, so start him. Then you have Tevin Coleman, the running back for the Falcons. Dallas allows the 13th fewest points to running backs. He had a quiet last week after having a huge week the week before, but right now he is their starter. He's going to get a majority of the carries, touches. He'll get some targets in the passing game, and so I think he's a guy that you got to start as a running back too. Then you have Ito Smith. So Ito Smith is what I call touchdown dependent. It's hard to trust him unless he's facing a bad defense or if Coleman gets hurt. Otherwise, this guy is going to run hot or cold, and you run the risk when you play him. He could have a big game. He could be a nice guy that you could play as a flex, or he could lay an egg for you. He's just not consistent. So for me, I would suggest against a solid Dallas defense sitting him. As far as wide receivers go, Julio Jones faces Dallas. Dallas allows the fewest points to wide receivers. Doesn't matter. Jones is so good. You need to start him every week. Currently, he's leading the NFL in receiving yards. That brings us to Calvin Ridley. Calvin Ridley is another one that's kind of touchdown dependent. He's got 7 touchdowns on the year, but that Dallas defense is good. This guy's got a bright future in the NFL, but I would advise sitting Calvin Ridley this week as a wide receiver 4. And then you have Mohamed Sanu. I would sit him. He's a wide receiver 5 this week. Now, as far as the wide receivers for Dallas go, I look at Hearns, Beasley, Michael Gallup, playing Atlanta, allowing the 3rd most points to wide receivers. If you look at those other guys, those targets are spread out too much to really trust any of them. I would advise sitting them all. If you had to play a guy, it'd be Michael Gallup at this point. In terms of snaps, he's a number 2 wide receiver clearly after Amari Cooper, and so he'd be the one to go with. As far as Amari Cooper goes there, he's had nice yards, targets, catches. He had a touchdown last week. Things are trending up for him after the trade. He's building nice rapport from Dak Prescott. That'll continue to improve. I like those 2 there. And he's rebounded nicely after a trade. People forget, though, even though he struggled a little bit in Oakland, that Oakland team is dysfunctional right now, so I think a lot of that was just from the team. But even before the trade, he had really 2 good games for Oakland. In one game, he had 10 catches for 116 yards. Another game, he had 8 catches, 126 yards, and a touchdown. Started him as a wide receiver 2 this week. This guy has got a lot of talent. You forget he was a former first-round pick, so start him. As far as tight ends go, you have Austin Hooper. He's developing a really nice tight end option. Now, he's not close to tier 1 yet, which means based on matchup, he'll disappear from time to time. Now, he's playing Dallas, allowing the 11th fewest points to tight ends. I would expect today of maybe 6 catches for 65 yards. Not great, but solid. Go ahead and start him. And I would sit Dallas tight ends. As far as kickers go, whoever ends up kicking for Atlanta, whether it's Tavecchio or Bryant, doesn't matter. Start whichever one ends up kicking this week for them. And I would start kicker Mayer for Dallas, and I would sit both defenses in this one. Let's take a look at the Panthers and the Lions there. Look at Matthew Stafford. Last 2 games, he struggled quite a bit. But you have to remember, you got to put it in the context of who he was playing. He was on the road against the Vikings and the Bears, and both of those defenses are very good. Right now, the Vikings lead the NFL in sacks. They got Everson Griffin back. You look like Xavier Rhodes is healthy. The Bears, when he played them, they just got Khalil Mack back, and so everything was working against him there. Before that, the 5 previous games, he'd been very good. He had 10 touchdown passes to only 1 interception. So I think he's a guy, he's a veteran, he's been around for a while. He's going to rebound and have a decent game. Now, one of the things that's going to hurt is the loss of Golden Tate. But I still think he has enough weapons there. You look at running backs, Kerryon Johnson, Theo Riddick are very good. They're very active in the passing game. They got good hands. Marvin Jones, if he plays, is a very good wide receiver. And Kenny Golladay is solid also. Now, he's playing Carolina to give the 12th most points to quarterbacks. And those numbers actually would probably be even higher. They played Falco, Dak, Alex Smith. Those guys had quiet games. But if you look at the other quarterbacks, take away once again, Joe Flacco, Dak Prescott, Alex Smith. The other quarterbacks that have faced them have averaged over 27 fantasy points per game. So I like Matthew Stafford in this one. I would start him. Brings us to Cam Newton. So Cam Newton plays Detroit, allowing the 11th fewest points to quarterbacks. But if you look a little bit deeper, they've got torch. In fact, if you look deeper, Detroit, 5 of the last 6 quarterbacks that faced them have really torched them and had big days. The only quarterback that did not have a big day in the last 6 games is Kirk Cousins. And the reason why Kirk didn't was because they actually crushed the Lions. They needed to throw the ball a lot. The defense had 2 touchdowns. They had 10 sacks. And so that defense has really given up a lot of points to quarterbacks. Start Cam Newton there. As far as running backs go, you got Kerryon Johnson. Kerryon Johnson has been very effective this year. 5.4 yards per carry. He's shown good hands in the passing game. He's a true 3-down back. He's clearly lead back for that team. I would start him as a running back 2 against Carolina, allowing the 6th fewest points to running back. So it's a tougher matchup, but he's a guy because of his volume play and his development. You got to start there. You got Christian McCaffrey. So Lions allow the 8th most points to running backs. Christian is a must-start, top 5 or 6 running back in PPR scoring. In PPR scoring, he's a running back, tier 1 stud. In standards, I would lower him down. He's still running back 1, but he's at the lower spectrum of that. As far as wide receivers go, you got Marvin Jones. ESPN's Adam Schefter reports Marvin Jones' knee is day-to-day with a bone bruise. So you have to monitor that there. He's playing the Panthers, allowing the 16th fewest points to wide receivers. If he plays in that game, Jones, I would start as a wide receiver 3. If he misses time, TJ Jones will have an increased role, but not enough that you could start him. That brings us to Kenny Golladay. So Kenny Golladay started the year very good, had 5 good games. Okay, he was on the brink of getting into that wide receiver 1 conversation there, and then he took a step backwards, regressed, but he rebounded last week nicely. Versus Carolina, giving up the 14th most points to wide receivers. I should say 16th most points to wide receivers, like I said previously. Now, I think the concern I have, or maybe this is a benefit to them, is that Lions defense is struggling. I think they're going to give up a lot of points to Cam Newton in that offense, and they're going to have to throw a lot. I think another bonus for Golladay there is that Golden Tate is gone, so some of those targets that were going his way are going to solidify for him. I think we're going to see an increase in targets of Kenny Golladay moving forward there. And so he's a guy that I would start this week as a wide receiver 2. You have Devin Funchess, a wide receiver for Carolina, playing Detroit, to allow the 4th fewest points to wide receivers. So that Detroit defense, not good, but the one area where they actually stingy is against wide receivers. Now you look at Devin Funchess. He's really disappointed even in some good matchups this year. And the reason why is I just think wide receivers just don't flourish in Cam Newton-led offenses. The reason why is you've got McCaffrey there, Olsen there, they gobble up targets. He loses yardage points and touchdowns to Cam Newton's legs often. And so there's a lot of reasons why I would devalue him. He's a low-end wide receiver play this week if you have to start the guy. In smaller leagues, Devin Funchess is a wide receiver 4 this week. I would sell other wide receivers in this one. As far as tight ends go, you got Greg Olsen. He's a solid play. He's a top 10 tight end moving forward from week to week. I would sit all Lions tight ends. I would start Gano. Prater is a guy that you could start as a kicker, but he's a lower end play. As far as defenses go, sit the Lions defense. You could start Carolina facing the Lions, giving up the 8th most points to defenses. So Carolina's worth starting. They're not a great play, but they're a solid play. Look at the Titans versus the Colts there. Start with Marcus Mariota. So I was playing Indianapolis Colts, giving up the 13th most points to quarterbacks. Now, particularly those numbers are a little bit skewed there. Those numbers actually be worse, but they were padded. They faced Derek Anderson one game, only scored 1 fantasy point in that game, and so they'd actually be a little bit worse. They'd probably be closer to like 9 or 10 most points allowed to quarterbacks there. Now, Marcus struggled early in the year after having a bad year last year. I think there's a few reasons why he struggled. One, he had an arm injury there that he was struggling. Early in the year, the coach said there's some throws he just simply could not make. He hurt his elbow, but that's getting healthier. The bye week helped there. I think that they had a tougher part of their schedule they went through. They faced Jags, Bills, Ravens, things like that. I think that schedule is going to get easier for them. And he had some young wide receivers that are starting to develop, and as they get better, he's getting better. And then the final thing that I think reason why you can start to trust Marcus Mariota is they begin to work in Dion Lewis. Dion Lewis is a very effective running back in space. He's got great hands on the backfield. He just makes that offense better, more balanced there. Last 3 games, he's shown improvement. And they're playing Andrew Luck and the Colts. Andrew Luck has got to be, apart from Pat Mahomes, the hottest quarterback in the NFL. I suppose you could even argue right now he's hotter than Pat Mahomes. 21 touchdown passes last 6 games. Indianapolis is winning games, scoring points, and Marcus is going to have to throw the ball to keep up with them. I think that bodes well. And also added bonuses, guy's got some legs. He'll get you an occasional 20, 30, 40 rushing yards there. So I would start Marcus in this one. As far as Andrew Luck goes, he's playing the Titans. Now the Titans are allowing the 4th fewest points to quarterbacks. Well, last week, Andrew Luck faced the Jags, and they were tough against quarterbacks too. It didn't matter. He's playing so well. Like I mentioned, 21 touchdown passes last 6 games. Start Andrew Luck. This guy's a stud in this one. As far as running backs go, you got Dion Lewis versus Indianapolis, allowing the 9th most points to running backs. He was quiet last week, but his 20 carries really show the team is committed to making him their go-to guy. I like that. They've increased his role in that offense, has really turned a corner. That's the 4th week in a row if you look at that. His carries actually have increased. This guy's great in the passing game. So I think he's a solid start as a running back 2 or flex and PPRs. In standards, you'll always value a little bit. Once again, I like Dion Lewis moving forward. And then you got Derrick Henry. A lot of people loved him in the preseason. We didn't. We gave some analytics to why we felt like you need to stay away from him, why he was going to have a breakout year. In fact, we said that he was going to be a bust. Now, before last game, he did have a good game last game. I'll give him credit to that. And he'll have an occasional decent game, but before last game, his yards per carry of 3.3 yards simply not good. He's not good in the passing game. He's very limited there. So you could only consider starting him in standard leagues. He's touchdown dependent. Personally, I need to see more from this guy before I would trust him. I would advise sitting him. I see him more as a running back 4 this week, maybe a running back 3 in standard leagues that are 12 teams or larger. And I think another reason why is it's clear that he's not going to become the go-to guy there, and he's not going to suddenly turn around. Last game is not an indication that he's going to suddenly get 20, 25 carries per game. Is the team is clearly moving forward with Lewis as the #1 back. He is more versatile, and that offense is simply better. I think another reason why he was able to get the carries that he did is they got out ahead early on the Patriots, able to milk the clock there. So I would stay away from Derrick Henry if you can. Now look at Marlon Mack in this one. Titans give up the second fewest points to running backs. Now, after tearing up the Jets, Bills, and Raiders, Jags shut him down last week. I see a continued decrease in production going into this one there against a underrated Titans defense. With that said, Mack is clearly the lead back there. And there are very few owners that have enough running back depth that they can afford to sit him. For a lot, you're going to have to start him. But what I would say, he's a low-end running back too. If you have better options out there, I would start them, and I would sit him this week if you could afford to do that. So as the other running backs go, I like Hines. I like Hines in PPR leagues. But he really needs poor play to Mack over a consistent period of time or an injury to Marlon Mack before he can be trusted. I would sit him. And you only start him in PPR leagues there. As far as wide receivers go, you have Corey Davis playing the Colts, giving up the 9th fewest points to wide receivers. So the Colts look like they're stingy against wide receivers, but if you consider they face the Jets, Bills, Oakland, and Washington, who don't have any good wide receivers there at all, the good wide receivers that have faced them, they've been exposed. So I think that Corey Davis, because he's going to find space, he's going to get open, he's going to have a decent day. He's had back-to-back week with 10 targets, and so far this year he's had 2 really good weeks. He's had some ugly ones mixed in there. I think a lot of that had to do with Marcus struggling, but as Mariota's picking things up, Corey Davis' numbers are going to go up there. I like him. Start him as a wide receiver 2 this week. They're going to have to keep pace with Andrew Luck on the road, so I think that bodes well for him. As far as the other Titans wide receivers, there's a lot of young players there that have some talent, but they're not enough consistent touches or targets to trust any one of them, and so I would sit all others. As far as the wide receivers for the Colts go, you have T.Y. Hilton. So the Titans are tough against opposing quarterbacks and running backs. They kind of have a bend but don't break mentality because if you look at it, they actually allow points to wide receivers. In fact, the 9th most points to wide receivers. Now, last season against the Titans, he struggled. Hilton last year against the Titans had 1 catch for 19 yards. Another game he had 2 catches for 15. But Andrew Luck was not the quarterback. There was a huge difference there. The year before that, before Andrew Luck was injured, T.Y. Hilton torched him. And so I think that he's going to be a decent play there. He, apart from his tight ends, that's the favorite target for Luck there. I would start him as a wide receiver too. Are the Colts wide receivers? If you look at Luck, Andrew Luck loves to target his tight ends. In fact, percentage-wise, he targets his tight ends more than any other quarterback in the NFL. So you got Doyle, you got Ebron, and you got Hilton. After that, there's not a lot of targets left for the rest of those wide receivers. Sit them. The only reason why Rodgers had value there is Doyle was out for a while, and so was Hilton. But now that they're back, you need to sit the rest of the wide receivers for the Colts. As far as tight ends go, you got Juno Smith playing the Colts, allowing the 7th most points to tight ends. After being quiet, he's had back-to-back weeks with a touchdown. Mariota's plays improved. That's helping. He's somebody you could consider to start if you need be. Obviously, there's much better options out there, but if you're in a very large league and you're in a pinch, he's not a bad sleeper play this week. And Jack Doyle plays the Titans. Titans give the fewest points to tight ends. But the Colts use their tight ends more than any other team in the NFL. And so I think this week's going to be a tougher play for them. I think there's concerns between that and target distribution between him and Eric Ebron. And so I think he's still a guy that you need to start. For me, he's outside the top 10, but he's still a quality start. And then there's Eric Ebron. Eric Ebron right now, 10 touchdowns on the year. I think you apply the same consideration for Doyle. It's going to be a little bit tougher. He's going to lose some targets to Doyle. They have a tougher matchup, but you can't sit Eric Ebron at this point. 10 touchdowns is incredibly good, and so start both of those guys. As far as kickers go, you have Vinatieri and Suckup, start both, and I would sit both defenses in this one. Let's go to the Bucs versus the Giants. Let's start with Ryan Fitzpatrick. So look at Ryan Fitzpatrick there versus the Giants. That defense is solid against the pass. But of course, now they've lost cornerback Apple and then one of their best defensive linemen, in fact, one of the best defensive linemen in the NFL at the trade deadline. And if you look at last week, Ryan Fitzpatrick moved the ball really effectively. He moved it well. Only problem is he self-destructed in the red zone. He had no touchdown passes, he had 2 interceptions, but his 400 passing yards saved the day for a lot of fantasy owners. And that's the 4th time in 7 games that he's over 400 yards passing. He's a guy that I would start, but for me, he's not in the top 10. For me, he's not in the top 10, but he is in the top 15. Ryan Fitzpatrick is a guy that you could start out there. Once again, not top 10, but definitely in the top 15 based on your scoring system. Then you have Eli Manning
versus Tampa Bay, allowing the 4th most points to quarterbacks, the worst defense in the NFL, allowing 32.3 points per game there. They've been incredibly bad. Now, last week they did show some slight improvement, Tampa Bay versus Washington, but you have to put that in its context also. Washington was missing a lot of key starters in the offensive line. Crowder was out. Richardson's on the IR. That Bucs defense is simply bad. Now, you look at Eli Manning. He struggled to find the end zone, but he did have 3 touchdown passes on Monday night. But before that, he had 4 consecutive games over 300 yards passing. This is a guy that I'm not a big fan of Eli Manning. They need to look for a quarterback for the future. But in this game this week, I like Eli Manning as a start against Tampa Bay there. As far as running backs go, you got Saquon Barkley. Playing Tampa Bay gives up the 10th most points to running backs. I would start that stud. That's a no-brainer. Barkley is amazing. If he was on a better team, who knows what he'd be putting up for numbers. This week, don't be surprised. Barkley's going to get you over 100 total yards and 2 touchdowns. Then you got Peyton Barber. Peyton Barber only has value in standards. He's playing New York. And so I would expect a very an average day of 15 carries, 55 yards would be about what you're going to get from him. If you have better plays out there, I would probably do that. He's a guy that's got a safe floor but a very, very low ceiling. As far as wide receivers go, let's look at Mike Evans. Playing the Giants, allowing the 6th fewest points to wide receivers. But if you take a deeper look at the Giants, once again, the sixth fewest points allowed to wide receivers. They haven't faced a lot of good wide receivers up to this point. When they faced Julio Jones, Hopkins, Jeffrey, they had good games versus them. And so I think Mike Evans is going to rebound after having back-to-back bad games. Now, as good, for example, as Michael Thomas has been this year, we know he's having a phenomenal year. People forget he had 2 games in there sandwich where he was just average. So I think, yeah, Mike Evans had a great year in the last 2 games. He was kind of quiet. He did drop a touchdown pass last week, but he's going to rebound this week. You got to start Mike Evans at wide receiver 1, even though his numbers are down. The week that you sit him is the week that he goes off and has 100 yards and 3 touchdowns, so play him. As far as the other Tampa Bay wide receivers, you got Humphreys and Godwin and Jackson. To me, this is, it's a crapshoot trying to figure out who you can trust. They all have value. This offense is constantly playing from behind. They have to throw the ball all the time. But who do you start? Early in the year, Chris Godwin looked solid, but Deshaun Jackson was the guy to go to. And then Adam Humphreys looked like he was kind of rising to the surface there. He was getting more targets. He was productive. And then last week, Godwin goes out and explodes for 7 catches over 100 yards. From week to week, it's going to be hard to pin down who you can trust. And for that reason, this is a situation, personally, when I play fantasy, I try to avoid it. I'll trade out of it. I try to upgrade to somebody better. I just don't want to try to take a chance on who I can trust. All of them, for me, fall into that wide receiver 4 range. Once again, one of those guys will go out and have a good week. The question is, who's it going to be? And if an expert can say, I'll tell you why definitively, he's lying to you. You simply just don't know, and so stay away from them. As far as wide receivers for the Giants, got Sterling Shepard playing Tampa Bay, allowing the 2nd most points to wide receivers. Start him as a wide receiver 2. He's very underrated. They had Odell Beckham. Started as a wide receiver 1. Quietly, he started the year kind of quiet. I think a lot of people thought he was having kind of an off year, but currently he's a 7th wide receiver in fantasy scoring. This week, he's my number 1 wide receiver in terms of rankings. Number 1 above all. He's got a great matchup there. You need to start him. As far as tight ends go, you got Evan Ingram. Start versus Tampa Bay, allowing the 2nd most points to tight ends. Then you have O.J. Howard. O.J. Howard finally had a bad game. If you look at all the games that he's played, not including the one where he got injured, he had 7 games where he had good plays. He'll rebound this week, start him. As far as kickers go, I would start Aldrick Rosas. Now, Tampa Bay cut Carzaro, and they signed Santos. I would avoid that kicking situation for Tampa Bay. I would sit Tampa Bay's defense. New York's defense is not a bad play this week, but I think it's better to sit them also. The Texans versus the Redskins. So Alex Smith playing the Texans, allowing the 6th fewest points to quarterbacks. J.J. Watt and that defense is looking better and better. The Skins' offensive line is missing some key starters there. Crowder's going to miss the game most likely. Richardson's out for the year. Sit Alex Smith in this one. That'd be a mistake to try to play him. You got Deshaun Watson. So if you look at the strength of the Skins, the Redskins' defense is their strength, obviously, there. Now, Watson, we said in the preseason, is going to have a slight regression. He's had that. If you look at our videos, we said, hey, we like this guy. We think he's still top 10, but he's going to regress a little bit. He has regressed. But he's talented, and he's good. And he's going to have another week here now with Demaryius Thomas working that offense to build rapport. Kiki Cutie might be back in that game, so that's a huge boost for him. Most sites have him ranked around 8 or 9 this week, and we have him between the 10 to 12 ranking for quarterbacks based on your scoring system. That's going to fluctuate. So start him, but he's not a top 5 player, anything close to that this week. As far as running backs go, you got Lamar Miller. Look at the Redskins. The Redskins are stingy against the run. They're only allowing 90 rushing yards per game against teams. It looked like Coleman was the best running back versus him this year. He had 88. Other than that, the best running back only had a total of 61. So I have concerns about Lamar Miller in this game, but he's a must-start because of his role and the guaranteed touches he's going to get. So we start him as a what I would call a low running back 2. Got Adrian Peterson. Guy came there, looked like his career had resurgence. He was looking great, but that offensive line is so depleted now. And you can see that because the last 2 games after the offensive line have lost some key starters there, his yards per carry have been 3.03. I think that's going to continue this week against the Texans. So if you can, sit Adrian Peterson in this one. And then you got Capri Bibbs or Chris Thompson. What do you do with that? I would sit Bibbs regardless. Chris Thompson, if he plays, has PPR value as a flex play and PPR scoring on deeper leagues, 12 teams or larger. Watch the injury report and see what happens there to determine that. As far as wide receivers go, you have Maurice Harris playing the Texans, allowing the 7th fewest points to wide receivers. Washington's going to struggle on offense. They have so many injuries. The Texans defense is playing good. Avoid Harris there. Now, you look at Josh Doxson. Josh Doxson has a pedigree. He's a former first-round pick. And this guy, when he's healthy, he's actually got he finds the end zone quite a bit. He's actually had 6 last year, got a couple this year, so he's looking good there. But I think it's just a risky play. I would stay away from him also. As far as Kiki Cutie. There's a high possibility he's going to return this week versus the Redskins. Now, what exactly his role is going to look like with Demaryius Thomas there now, it's hard to say. And so I think for me that he needs what I would call a prove-it game to come back, play, see exactly what that role is going to be, target distribution. I would stay away from Kiki this week. Now, as far as Demaryius Thomas goes, playing the Redskins allowed the 8th most points to wide receivers. Now, in his first game with the Texans, started out pretty quickly there. He had 3 catches for 61 yards, but the rest of the game he was pretty quiet. But he's had more time now to learn the offense, build rapport with the quarterback there. I also think that Josh Norman in this game is going to line up. I think Josh Norman is going to try to, shadow, quite a bit DeAndre Hopkins in this one. So I would say that Demaryius Thomas could be a wide receiver 3. I think he's a safe play with a lower ceiling. As far as DeAndre Hopkins goes, facing a good defense, but it doesn't matter who he's faced. He's faced good defense. He's faced good corners. They've slowed him down, but you can't stop this guy. He's a matchup-proof start each week. He's a matchup-proof start, wide receiver 1 stud. Doesn't matter. I don't care if Josh Norman has a great game versus him. I don't care if they double team. I don't care if they bring a safety over. You need to start Hopkins. He's a great wide receiver. As far as tight ends go, you get Jordan Thomas, the tight end for the Texans. He's going to show some signs of life there. He's looking better and better. He's playing the Skins, allowed the 9th fewest points at tight ends. So this is a guy that, even though he's better, he hasn't done enough to be trusted yet. He's got a tougher matchup against the Skins. I would avoid him. As Jordan Reed goes, Jordan Reed has been a major, major disappointment. Even in tight end friendly matchups this year, this guy has not produced. Sit him. And Vernon Davis, the only way you're going to start Vernon Davis is Jordan Reed ends up being out with an injury. If he does, then we can revisit that at that point. But right now, I would also sit him. I would start the Texans kicker, but I would sit the Skins kicker. I would start the Texans defense, but sit the Redskins defense. So let's look at the Steelers and the Jags. Blake Bortles. So, last week he had a nice game in terms of fantasy. He had 320 passing yards and 2 touchdown passes. It was against a weak Colts defense, bottom 3rd in the NFL. Now, this week he's playing Pittsburgh, who allowed the 7th most points to quarterbacks. Now, the Steelers had a run of about 11 to 12 games at the beginning of this year, going back to last year. That defense has struggled quite a bit after losing Ryan Shazier. They've been brutal on defense. They were allowing about 30 points per game. They had been bad. But the last 5 games, this defense has turned things around quite a bit. They're getting pressure on the quarterback there. In fact, if you look at the first 4 games this year, that defense was allowing 32.4 points per game to quarterbacks. But in the last 5, they're only allowing 14.5 points per quarterback. So that defense has improved quite a bit. Currently, they're tied with the Vikings and about 31 sacks. So they're getting pressure, like I said. They're doing quite a bit there. Now you add to the fact that defense is getting better, and Blake Bortles is unpredictable. He's below average. And so there's a lot of reasons why this could be concerning. Now, the one thing about Blake Bortles, if you look at his career, this guy has made a career off of garbage time statistics. So it's certainly possible in this one that they fall behind. Ben Roethlisberger and the offense scores 20, 30 points pretty early in the 3rd quarter, and he has to throw a bunch to play catch-up. But there's so much risk there with him that I would say it's best if you can avoid it. I would sit Blake Bortles in this one. As far as Ben Roethlisberger goes, in mock drafts, he was going around the 10 to 14 range there. And we did a video on that early in the season, and we had him ranked as our 5th quarterback overall. A lot of people said, are you crazy? Can I rank that high? Currently, he's 4th quarterback in scoring right now. So he's having a very good year there. Now, the Jags defense is a very good defense, but they've struggled lately. With that said, even with their recent struggles, this Jags defense is still in the top 10. They're very good there. They allow the 9th fewest points to quarterbacks. Problem with it is he's got so many good weapons on the team that you dare not sit this guy. And so I don't see a huge game from Ben Roethlisberger, but I think that he's going to be solid enough that you should play him this week against the Jags. I think he'll be productive. As far as running backs goes, Leonard Fournette. So Leonard Fournette returned last week, made a lot of owners happy. Now he plays the Steelers that give up the 5th fewest points to running backs. Now, last week, he actually didn't run the ball very effectively. What saved his day is 2 touchdowns, the fact he had 5 catches for 56 yards. I do have some concerns with him overall as a running back. His rookie year, his yards per carry, 3.9, was not great. You look at last week, he had 24 carries for 53 yards at 2.2 yards per carry. On the year, it's only 2.8. And so he's facing a solid defense. There's a lot of reasons why Leonard Fournette concerns me. Now, part of the reason why his yards per carry could be low last year and again this year is because defensive coordinators have decided that they're going to load the box and force Blake Bortles to try to beat them, which is not a bad strategy at all. So I do have concerns. Now, the one saving grace for him is last year versus the Steelers. He had some big games. What do you do with Leonard Fournette? Do you sit him? Do you start him? What do you do? Well, you got to start the guy because his volume is so high. He's a clear lead back there. He's going to get a lot of touches. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets 20, 25 carries and 5 or 6 targets in the passing game. So for me, I would start him as a running back 2, but I would lower your expectations. So he's a lower running back 2 in this one. And then James Conner. I want to smile right now. I got him in 3 leagues. Thank you, Le'Veon Bell, for holding out. You just made my day today. So Steelers coach Mike Tomlin said Connor's got a concussion, but he's going to practice Wednesday. Everything is projected for him to play in this game, so it looks like he's slotted to play. Versus the Jaguars, allowing the 4th fewest points to running backs. Now, they're tight against running backs. Once again, 4th fewest points to running backs there, but there have been a few running backs that actually found some running room there, so they can be exposed. But it doesn't matter to me. Right now, James Conner is running so well that you cannot sit this guy. He's also involved in the passing game. There's a million reasons why you'd be foolish to avoid it, even in a tough matchup. Start James Conner as a low running back 1. As far as wide receivers go, you got Juju Smith-Schuster. The Jags give up the fewest points to wide receivers. Now I'm looking at Jalen Ramsey. I think Jalen Ramsey is probably going to spend a lot of time looking at Antonio Brown lined up against him and try to close him down. Last season, the rookie Juju Smith-Schuster against the Jags struggled. But a year later, he's gotten better. That offense has gotten better. I would start him this week as a wide receiver 3. He's too talented to sit, but he's definitely not in the 1 to 2 range there. So as Antonio Brown goes, last season for the Jaguars, doesn't matter. Last season versus the Jaguars, he saw Jalen Ramsey. He had one game, 19 targets, 10 catches, 157 yards. And the other game, he had 7 catches, 132 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Doesn't matter who the matchup is. Doesn't matter the defense. Doesn't matter the cornerback. He's a must-start wide receiver 1 every week. Let's look at the wide receivers for the Jaguars. You got Dante Moncrief. So he's playing the Steelers, allowing the 10th most points to wide receivers. That number is actually improving lately. That defense is getting better, like I previously had mentioned there. Now, 5 of the last 6 games, Moncrief has been very productive, averaging 83 yards per game. He's the clear number 1 wide receiver for the Jaguars, and about the only wide receiver right now that I would trust in that matchup, so I would start him as a wide receiver 3. As far as Cole, Westbrook go, they're inconsistent in terms of their touches, their volume, their play. Blake Bortles carries a lot of risk, and so for me, Westbrook is a wide receiver 4, and Cole is a wide receiver 5. I would sit both of those guys. Sit the Jags tight ends, and then there's Vance McDonald. So Vance McDonald's had 1 really good game this year. And he's had 3 solid games, but not great. And so I think he's playing the Jaguars there. Jaguars defense is solid. I think another concern for me is that Pittsburgh offense has so many other weapons. So should you play him? Should you not play him? Well, last year versus the Jaguars, Vance McDonald had a good game. 10 catches, 116 yards. I think he can be started as what I would call a tight end 2. A solid play, but not a great play there. Outside of the top 10, but definitely within the top 15. I would start Boswell, kicker, and Lambeau. I would start the Steelers defense, and if you can afford it, I would sit the Jags defense in this one. Bengals versus the Ravens. So let's look at Joe Flacco. Is it going to be Joe Flacco in this one? Is it going to be Jackson, Robert Griffin? Who's going to be starting right now? Well, whoever it is starting for them, they're playing Cincinnati, who are allowing the most points to quarterbacks. Now listen to this stat I'm going to give you real quickly there. This is a great matchup for whoever starts for the Ravens. The Bengals have given up over 500 yards in 3 consecutive games. They're the first team in Super Bowl era to do that. They're on pace to give up the most yardage in NFL history. And so that defense is just getting worse and worse. It's going to overtake Tampa Bay as the worst defense here pretty soon. Concern I have, though, is let's say it's Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco started the year pretty good, but he's reverted back to the self he had a couple years before. This guy's really struggled quite a bit there. And he's questionable this week with a hip injury. Now, he was on crutches during the bye week. Now, the coach did come out and he said that he doesn't need Flacco to practice to play. He said he's been here for years. He knows the offense. He'll be fine if he doesn't get practice reps in. But for me, a guy that struggled lately, that hasn't had time down with his wide receivers there, I think that, I want to see some practice time. I want to know the hip is okay. The other concern I have, if Joe Flacco starts and you started him, even though the matchup is great, is all it takes is him twisting that hip a certain way, getting hit, and he aggravates that injury and he's out for the game. And so for me, I'm going to stay away from Joe Flacco. The only way I consider starting a quarterback here is to go Lamar Jackson. If Lamar Jackson gets the start against a Cincinnati Bengals defense that has been brutal, I take my shots on that. I think it's a good matchup there. As far as Andy Dalton go, 2 of the last 3 games, he's really struggled a bit. Now, he's playing a Ravens defense that is good with A.J. Green, who's out. So there's a lot of concerns going into that. And we saw the effect of not having A.J. Green does last game there. He's just a huge boost for that team. So I would recommend sitting on the road versus a good Ravens defense. Now, last time he played the Ravens, he had a good first half there, but the second half the Ravens made some adjustments and he didn't do that good. And so there's just a lot of reasons why I would stay away from him. Once again, playing on the road against a good defense without A.J. Green, sit Andy Dalton. As far as the running backs go, you've got Alex Collins. Alex Collins plays the Bengals, allowing the second most points to running backs. He's had 4 touchdowns in the last 4 games. For him, the yards have been hard to come by. But I wouldn't be that surprised. I think he's going to get to carry the ball quite a bit in this game. I wouldn't be surprised if he breaks 100 yards rushing in this one. I think they're going to run the ball quite a bit. One, if it's Lamar Jackson, they'll run the ball to take pressure off the rookie quarterback. If it's Joe Flacco, they'll run the ball to take pressure off of the defense, trying to bring pressure on the quarterback and hit the veteran who's banged up a bit. Either way, I like Alex Collins in this one as a solid running back too. As far as Javarius Allen goes, he only has value in PPR leagues this week. I think he could be started as a flex in PPRs in larger leagues. As far as Joe Mixon has really established himself as a very good running back, fulfilling the potential a lot of people thought he had going into the draft. Last year going into the draft, a lot of people felt like this guy had first round ability, but his stock dropped because of the domestic abuse charge that he'd had. And so he's coming out right now and he looks great. What's been hurting Joe Mixon is game flow. You look at last week, he started hot. He touched the ball 5 times on the opening drive for 42 total yards. Looked like he was in for a big game, and after that his numbers pummeled. They fell behind by quite a bit. They had to throw the ball a lot, and that decreased how many snaps he saw. In this game, though, I think they'll be able to stick with Mixon for a while. The reason why is that Ravens' offense is not prolific, and I think he'll get a lot of carries. And so I think that look at Joe Mixon is what I would call a high-end running back to start this week, even though the Ravens give up the fewest points to running backs. And the reason why I like him is, one, Ravens give up the fewest points to running backs, but Joe Mixon is very good in the passing game. He's got good hands. I think he's going to get a lot of carries, so I think that volume-wise, Joe Mixon is a solid play this week. As far as wide receivers go, you got John Ross. Ravens give up the 5th fewest points to wide receivers. John Ross had a touchdown last game, but he hasn't been that great in his career. He's been banged up a lot. The targets, the yardage is simply not there. I would sit him. Then you have Tyler Boyd. Tyler Boyd's having a really good season, but there's a big difference between the number 2 wide receiver on a team with A.J. Green getting the attention of the number 1 corner and the safety and other things, and right now he's going to face the number 1 corner. So I think he's a guy that, because of his role, you could argue it both ways. Being the number 1 guy, he'll see more targets, or he'll have a tougher matchup on defense. I think what we're going to see is a tougher matchup on defense is going to be detrimental to his statistics. Yet he's still their best wide receiver, so you got to start him as a wide receiver 3. As far as the wide receivers go for the Ravens, you got Michael Crabtree. Playing the Bengals, allowing the 4th most points to wide receivers. Like I mentioned, 3 games straight, they've allowed over 500 total yards. So he's got a great matchup. Now, on the other hand, Michael Crabtree is disappointed. So which one is it? Who wins out? Bad defense, bad performance? Where is it? Well, I think Crabtree right now, I think wins this one. I think that he's a good start this week as a wide receiver 3, or wide receiver 2 if you're in what I would call smaller leagues. Or larger leagues, I should say. Wide receiver 3 in medium to smaller leagues, and wide receiver 2 in larger leagues. And so I like Michael Crabtree in this matchup. I think he's going to rebound with a decent game. 7 catches, maybe 80 yards and a touchdown. And you have John Brown. John Brown is having a better year than Michael Crabtree, obviously there. And so for me, in this great matchup against the Bengals, he's a wide receiver 2, start him. And then as far as tight ends go, I would sit all tight ends. Now, yes, the Bengals allowing the 2nd most points to tight ends, but the targets get spread out there. You got Andrews, you got Hayden Hurst. Can't trust any of those guys as far as the snap count, splits, targets, touches like that. It's just too difficult to pin it down, so I would stay away from that even in a good matchup. I would start kicker Tucker, and I would sit Bullock. I would start the Ravens defense, and I would sit the Bengals defense. Let's look at the Raiders versus the Cards. Josh Rosen. The Raiders allowed the 11th most points to quarterbacks. Nice matchup, right? Doesn't matter. Rosen just got a long way to go before you can trust him. I would sit him in this one. There's better options out there for you, unless you're in a 16-team, 2-quarterback league, and there are some out there. But if you can afford it, sit him. Derek Carr is playing the Cardinals. That Cardinals defense is good. They allow the 8th fewest points to quarterbacks. Now, you look at Derek Carr. He's had 2 good games this year. He's had 7 bad games. You look at Nelson's banged up. Bryant is hurt. The wheels are starting to come off of the Raiders. I would sit him. As far as running backs go, you have Doug Martin. The Cardinals are good on defense. Quarterbacks struggle against the Cardinals. Wide receivers struggle at times against the Cardinals. But they do allow points on the ground. If you look at them right now, they allow the 4th most points to running backs. Now, since Marshawn Lynch went down, Doug Martin has played well. In fact, his yards per carry have been 4.67 yards per carry, very solid. I think what limits his ceiling is the offense. Derek Carr in that offense limits his ceiling. But Doug Martin, because of the fact that he's a starting running back there, and he's a guy they got to look at, so I think he's a running back 3 start. You got Jalen Richard in this one. So look at Jalen Richard. There's so many wide receivers that are banged up and hurt in the offense. I like Richard. I think he's going to get used a ton in the passing game in this one. Currently on the year, he's got 48 catches, so he's a solid play in PPR leagues, or I would say he's a running back 3 or flex play in PPR leagues. As far as David Johnson goes, so David Johnson plays Oakland, giving up the 7th most points to running backs. Even in tough matchups, David Johnson has to be started simply because the volume is there from week to week. They lean on him so much. So at the end of the year, I think his yards per carry are going to be lower this year. But this guy's got 8 touchdowns in 9 games. He's currently 11th in running back scoring in fantasy, even with all the struggles that he's had. But once again, playing Oakland, allowing the 7th most points to running backs, you need to start David Johnson in this one. As far as wide receivers go in Oakland, is there anybody there you could trust? The best guy there right now is Brandon LaFell. Brandon LaFell is leading that team. But he's got a day coming up with Patrick Peterson, and so I would stay away from all Raiders wide receivers. So as wide receivers go for the Cardinals, you got Christian Kirk. So I love the kid's potential. He's very talented, but he's young. Rosen is young, and so he's a wide receiver 4 this week. Sit him. You have Larry Fitzgerald. The Raiders are middle of the road in terms of points allowed to wide receivers. Now, we've seen an increase in his targets and catches the last few games, his yards. He's had a couple touchdowns. So I think that you see that Larry Fitzgerald is improving. So I would start him as a wide receiver 3. As far as Jared Cook goes to tight ends, Arizona is stingy to tight ends. So in the matchup is not good for Cook. But right now, he's Carr's most reliable target. So I would put him as a tight end that you could start but outside the top 10 this week. And you have Ricky Seals-Jones. The Raiders allowed the 8th most points to tight ends, but for me, Ricky's just not a guy that I can trust. Second-year tight end who was converted from wide receiver in college. I think that I like Ricky going into next year. I think he's got a lot of potential there, but right now he's still developing. Remember, once again, he was converted from wide receiver in college to tight end in the pros. You have the fact that Josh Rosen is a rookie and the offense is struggling quite a bit, and so next year's the year that you can really look to him to have a breakout year. But right now, I'd sit him. I would sit both kickers. I would sit the Raiders defense, but start the Cardinals defense in this one. Let's go to the Broncos versus the Chargers. Case Keenum playing the Chargers, allowing the 10th fewest points to quarterbacks. Now, if you look at it right now, if you look at Goff and Mahomes had big games versus the Chargers. But since then, that defense has been getting better and better. And at some point, they're going to get Joey Bosa back, probably not this week. But that defense is looking better and better. You look at Case Keenum, he's been disappointing all year long. Now he's lost Demaryius Thomas. That's got to hurt to some degree. Now he's got 7 touchdown passes and 7 interceptions in the last 8 games, which is not good. There's a lot of reasons why Case Keenum is a risky play. I would sit him. As far as Phillip Rivers goes in this one there. So you look at Phillip Rivers. He's having a very nice year this year. But he's playing Denver. That Denver front 7 is getting better. You look at the development of rookie lineman Chubb. He's developing. You add Miller into that, and they're allowing the 14th fewest points to quarterbacks, and that number is getting better and better each week. I think that Phillip Rivers is a safe play, but not a great play. I think another thing that hurts is Gordon's development. Melvin Gordon's development is making them a better offense and a better team, but it's taken away from some of the stats before Phillip Rivers had to throw the ball so much playing catch-up. So I think that you play him this week, but I think he's a low-end quarterback play. As far as running backs go, you have Philip Lindsay. Chargers allow the 15th fewest points to running backs. Lindsay is a clear lead back on that team right now. He's been productive, 5.4 yards per carry. I would start him as a running back 2 this week. Other running backs for Denver, if you look at Freeman might be back this week. It's nice to see him come back, see exactly what he does there. Booker's had some moments, but I would sit both of them in this matchup. What about Melvin Gordon? Well, he's a running back 1 stud. Just start him. Don't even think twice about it. Melvin Gordon's having a great year. He's a great running back. Go ahead and start him. As far as wide receivers go, you have Courtland Sutton. So Courtland Sutton, what do you think of it, Courtland Sutton? Well, the first game after Demaryius Thomas got traded, he didn't have a great game. He had 3 catches, 57 yards, but it was against a very good Texans defense there. I think things are going to open up a little bit for him this week. I think those numbers are going to go up. I wouldn't be surprised to see 5 catches for 85 yards. You got Casey Hayward's a good cornerback, but I think Casey Hayward in that defense will pay more attention to Emmanuel Sanders. So I would start Courtland Sutton as a wide receiver 3. And even Emmanuel Sanders, he's clearly the team's #1 wide receiver by far. He was even before they traded Demaryius Thomas. Statistically, he was killing him. I think Casey Hayward's going to see a lot of them. I think that's going to make difficult things for him. He's a guy that I would start as a wide receiver 3 in this matchup. They got Tyrell Williams, a wide receiver for the Chargers. Denver allows the 12th fewest points to wide receivers. Now, he's been productive. He's only averaging 4 targets per game. That's not that good. I don't like that. I like to see a little more targets there. And so for me, he's a wide receiver 4 in medium to small leagues, a wide receiver 3 in larger. He has more value in standards. And in PPR leagues, I would just sit Tyrell Williams. You have Keenan Allen. So a lot of people are getting kind of scared off, and a lot of owners were getting concerned about his production. But if you look at last year, his production took off after week 9. Well, sure enough, back-to-back weeks, he's had 2 good weeks in a row there. So I like him as a wide receiver 2 in this one. You got tight ends. So as far as tight ends go, Jeff, I don't even know. I'm going to get this wrong. I know some are going to get on me for this one. Sorry. You can gently, lovingly correct me in the comments. But Jeff Howerman, maybe is how you say it, tight end for the Denver Broncos, came off a big day, 10 catches, 83 yards, and a touchdown. So what is that? Is that what we call statistical anomaly? They happen from time to time. A player will come and have a huge week, or is that him getting the targets now that Demaryius Thomas had? So at this point, it's hard for me to trust him. If you look at other than that game, earlier in the year and last couple years, his numbers have been nothing to write home about. I need to see another game before I trust this guy. Sit him. I would sit the Chargers tight ends. You look at the kickers in this game. McManus. You look at Bagley. They're both decent plays. They're not bad. They're not great. You could start them if you have to. I would start the Chargers defense, and I would sit the Denver defense. Let's look at the Eagles versus the Saints. Let's look at Drew Brees. The Eagles are allowing the 9th most points to quarterbacks, and Drew Brees is absolutely killing it this year. He's got 21 touchdown passes to only 1 interception, a quarterback rating of 123.8, which if you finish with that, that would be the best in NFL history. This guy is having a phenomenal year. Start Drew Brees. Carson Wentz plays New Orleans. New Orleans allow the 2nd most points to quarterbacks. Carson Wentz is fully healed. He's playing great. This is the 3rd year in a row that his quarterback rating has improved. He's averaging only 300 passing yards per game this year. He's on pace for 34 touchdown passes over 16 games. Start Carson Wentz. As far as running backs go, Alvin Kamara. So Philly is tougher against running backs, but it really doesn't matter. Alvin Kamara is so good. He's so involved in the passing game. Start him as a running back 1. Then you have Mark Ingram. So Mark Ingram exploded last week. So what was that? He's been back a few weeks. He's healthy. He's productive. Or is that a byproduct of playing just a bad Cincinnati defense? Well, I think some of those numbers are a product of playing a bad Cincinnati defense. They're historically bad right now. So for me, I look at Mark Ingram. Even though he had a great game last week, I would say that he is a running back 3 or flex play. I need to see a little bit more before I trust him again, before I say he's back to last year. I'll just be honest, in the back of my mind, I do wonder about PEDs. Tested positive, and I wonder, if you look at early in his career, Mark Ingram wasn't great, and then boom, the guy just took off, gets nailed for PEDs, came back this year, going into last week, his yards per carry weren't great. He exploded against a bad Cincinnati Bengals defense there. And then here's the other thing I want to put out there for all of you. If you're looking at who's going to be the guy, Ingram or Kamara, if you watch that team in close games when they need a big play, they turn to Alvin Kamara. He's by far the better running back in that one. So Mark Ingram can be started, but I say he's a running back 3. As far as running backs for Philadelphia, look at Josh Adams. So 2 weeks in a row, this guy has looked good. I think his role is going to expand, but not this week. And here's why. They're going to be playing on the road, most likely playing from behind, and they're going to need to throw a lot. And that means that Smallwood's going to see a lot of action there. He's brought in oftentimes on passing situations. So I think it's going to be hard for Philadelphia to stick to the run. So I think they like Adams. I think he's going to improve. I think that role is going to expand for him. But this week, I think you're going to see a lot of Smallwood in that game. So that's the guy. If I would start a guy there, forget about Corey Clement. Smallwood is a guy that I would start in PPR leagues as a running back 3 flex play. As far as wide receivers go, Alshon Jeffrey. New Orleans allows the most points to wide receivers. Start him as a wide receiver 2. He's going to have a good game there. As far as Golden Tate goes, I know he disappointed last week after going to Philadelphia, but his role is going to expand. He's going to learn that offense better. He'll be on the field more. His snap count was restricted. Why, we don't know. I think part of it is learning the offense, getting the timing down with Carson Wentz. This week, I would start him in PPR leagues as a wide receiver 3. Then you look at the wide receivers for the Saints. Look at Michael Thomas. Philly allows the 3rd most points to wide receivers. But even if they were great against wide receivers, you're going to start Michael Thomas because the guy's having a great season. As far as the other wide receivers for the Saints go, the targets, the touches simply aren't there. I would sit all of them unless you're very, very desperate. Then I guess Traquan Smith would be your guy. As far as tight ends go, it's Zach Ertz. Now, New Orleans is allowing the 5th fewest points to tight ends. It doesn't matter. Zach Ertz right now is the #1 tight end in fantasy scoring. Start him. Then I have Benjamin Watson. The Eagles allow the 2nd fewest points to tight ends. I would sit Watson. Start Elliott and Lutz, both kickers, and I would sit both defenses in this one. Let's talk about the Vikings versus the Bears. Should be a good game there. I'm excited to watch it Sunday night. My Vikes, go Vikes. So you look at Kirk Cousins playing the Bears, allowing the 13th fewest points to quarterbacks there. Right now, Kirk Cousins has his best season as a pro, but they are in Chicago, and that Bears defense is good. I think a boost for him, though, is they're getting Dalvin Cook back. Dalvin Cook looked good, looked like he was fully healed last game. It's not just how he's going to affect the running game. Dalvin Cook is very good in the passing game, got great hands. He does well in space there. So I would start Kirk Cousins. For me, he's a quarterback in about the range 10 to 14 this week based on your scoring system. They have Mitch Trubisky. After 3 weeks of struggling, the guy's really turned it around, getting better and better. Nagy's offense is more and more creative there. Now he's playing Minnesota, gives up the 15th fewest points to quarterbacks, but they've actually been tougher against quarterbacks than those numbers would indicate, especially recently. Got some players back. I mentioned Everson Griffin is back now. He's a great defensive end. Xavier Rhodes is healthy. That defense is getting healthier and starting to click at this point. The last 4 quarterbacks that they have faced, including Stafford, Breeze, have only averaged 191 passing yards per game and totaling only 2 touchdown passes to 5 interceptions. Only Goff and Carson Wentz has really played well against that defense. Now, on the other hand, you have Mitch Trubisky, who's really stepped up his game since week 3. The guy's looking legit. He's got 17 touchdown passes to only 4 interceptions over that stretch. 4 times during that stretch, 300 passing yards per game. He also got 3 rushing touchdowns on year. And during that same stretch, he's had 4 times a QBR of over 100. So I think it helps for Mitch. It's a home game. That's huge. You won't have to deal with the crowd noise. So for me, he's above average play, but not a great play because he's facing the Vikings. As far as running backs go, you have Dalvin Cook. The Bears give up these 6 fewest points to running backs. Cook looked fully healed last game. So I would start as a low-end running back 2. And the reason why I say low-end running back 2 is I think he's got running back 1 potential and talent. But I need to see a full game with a full workload before I could trust him again in that sort of conversation as a running back 1. Plus, he's playing the Bears defense that is good. Latavius Murray, with Cook back there, I would sit Latavius Murray against a good Bears defense. You have Tariq Cohen in this one. So Minnesota allows the 9th fewest points to running backs. So I think their style of play is going to hurt Jordan Howard the most. I think Tariq and Cohen, it's actually going to increase Cohen's use in this offense there. He's maintained his value in PPR leagues. Now, if you look at versus the Jets and the Bills, he only had 1 catch. That was disappointing for a lot of owners, but the reason why is versus the Jets and the Bills, they killed them. And so they just didn't need to work the guy in. They rested the second-year running back. They're not going to blow out the Vikings. So he's going to have a lot of production there. I think he's going to get a lot of targets in the passing game. I think the Vikings slow down Jordan Howard quite a bit, and they're forced to go to Tariq Cohen more out there. So for me, I would start Cohen as a running back 2 in PPR. As far as Jordan Howard, Minnesota's tough against the run, and Jordan has not been great this year, 3.4 yards per carry. Now, he's had 4 touchdowns the last 4 games, but against some very bad teams. I would sit him in PPR leagues, and if you have to start Howard, it has to be in standards. He's touchdown dependent. There's just a lot of risk that you carry by starting him this week. It's better to sit if you can afford to do that. As far as wide receivers go, look at Gabriel and Miller, wide receivers for the Bears. Both show promise in Nagy's offense, but Minnesota allows the 4th fewest points to wide receivers. I would sit both of those guys. Then you have Allen Robinson. So Allen Robinson came back last week, and he had a huge week. They paid him a lot of money, brought him in to be the #1 wide receiver there. He's going to face Xavier Rhodes, and so for me, he's what I would call wide receiver 3/4, depending upon your league size. It's better to sit him, but if you're in a very large league, 14 teams or larger, then he could be started as a wide receiver 3. As far as the Vikings wide receiver, had Adam Thielen in this one. 6 games in a row, he had a touchdown. He had 8 games in a row this year, he had over 100 yards. Now the Bears allowed the 13th most points to wide receivers, so they are a good defense. They've got a good front 7, but their defensive backs can be exposed. Start Adam Thielen as a wide receiver 1. Stefon Diggs should be back this game. Sounds like he's ready to play. I would start as a wide receiver 2 in this. As far as tight ends go, Kyle Rudolph is overrated. We said that in the preseason. Sit this guy. Forget the name. People get caught up with Kyle Rudolph as a top 10 tight end. The numbers simply don't justify that. Sit him. As far as Trey Burton goes in this one, got 5 touchdowns on the year. He's a solid play. I would start him. He's not a great play, but I think he's a solid play. As far as kickers go, you got Bailey and Parquet. No, both of those guys are solid kickers. I think they play on a team. This could turn out to be a defensive battle where it turns out to be a lot of field goals being kicked. But the one concern I have is it's outdoors. It is a defensive game, or at least it could be a defensive battle there. So those guys are both worth starting, but they come with some low-end risk in this one. As far as defenses go, I would start both defenses, but I don't expect huge games from either. Once again, let me say that game. Start both defenses, but don't expect a lot from either. Let's get to our final game there. So much I want to say. I always feel bad in these videos. Like, I wish I could slow down and give you more information. But if I slow down and give you more information, even if I talk slower, I'd be here for 2.5 hours. So here's our final game. This is the game to watch. If you're going to put time on, you're going to take time out of your busy schedule to watch a game, this one's going to be fun to watch. Chiefs is in the Rams. Pat Mahomes and Jared Goff. It's going to be a high-scoring slugfest. Start both guys there. Great plays. Todd Gurley and Kareem Hunt. Both stud running backs. Start both. As far as Robert Woods and Brandon Cooks, it's heartbreaking to me that Cooper Kupp is out. I had him in 3 leagues. Fun receiver to watch. But because he's out, both of those wide receivers go from wide receiver 3 starts, they become wide receiver 2 starts, especially in this matchup. They're high-end wide receiver 2s, both Woods and Cooks. Start them. As far as Josh Reynolds goes, I think he's a low-end wide receiver 3-4 play in a game that should be very high scoring. I think he'd be a nice play, but don't expect him to suddenly fill in and get Cooper Kupp stats. It's not going to happen there. Then you have Sammy Watkins. He's going to return this week from all reports. Looks like he's healthy and ready to go there. Start as wide receiver 2. And then you have Tyreek Hill, start as a wide receiver 1. Pretty much just say start everybody in this game. Let's look at Kelsey. Start Travis Kelsey. That's another no-brainer. I would sit the Rams tight ends. I would start both kickers, and I would sit both defenses in this one. So there it is. There's our thoughts on who you should start and sit. If you have any questions, put them on the bottom. Thanks, and God bless for joining us today.